Hi, in today's video we're going to be building Emacs 30 as a pure GTK application with native compilation and treesitter support. So what's treesitter? It's a parser generating tool and incremental parsing library. It can build a concrete syntax tree in a source file and efficiently update the syntax tree as the source file is edited. So basically it's syntax highlighting and a better understanding of the language. So what I'm going to do is actually switch across to a shell script here and show you how it looks with normal syntax highlighting Emacs, and then I'll enable treesitter support for this script to show you the difference. So as you can see here, we've got a shell script for editing video. We can see here we've got a while statement, we've got some variables down here, if statements, some functions, and a case statement down the bottom. So what I'm going to do is actually turn on treesitter support for this language. So at the moment, you can see this is registered as a shell script. Now there isn't a treesitter language for shell scripts, but there is one for bash. So what I've done is use the bash mode. So what I do is enable TS. All the treesitter languages are called sort of TS mode. So if I do TS mode, you'll see a list of the languages here. I'm just going to come down to bash. And what you'll see is the syntax highlighting has now changed and actually made it more readable. So you can see here we've got the base name. And what you'll also see here is the different colors in the while statement. So this is for getOps, so you can see all the getOps options. All the case statements are now in different colors. So we've got S, I, and you can actually see this a lot more clearly. If I also come down to the variables here, what you can see is this is actually used to get the name of a file that's passed in without the file path, and you can see how this is sort of formatted. You can also see subshells, how this is formatted here. You can see the variable in here. And if I just come down, you can see the same thing with all these variables. This is a subshell with a date command. We've got the if statement. We also have the functions here, and what you can see is the variables are highlighted now. And this is a fallback here, so you can see the variable and the fallback variable. And if I just come down to the case statement, you'll see that's got different syntax highlighting as well. So what I'll just do is actually just turn this back off again, so you can see the difference. So you can see that's the standard shell mode, and this is the bash TS mode. So that's what the syntax highlighting looks like. So how do we actually get this set up? So unfortunately, there isn't actually a lot of documentation on this on the web about one, setting this up, and two, actually using the thing. So what I'm going to do is try and walk you through the steps. So in a previous video I did about a week ago, I built Emacs 30 with pure GTK support for Wayland and native compilation. What we're going to be doing now is actually expanding on that video and adding treesitter support. So this is the document I'm actually going to be going through with all the steps. And I'd also just like to point out a new feature that seems to have come out on GitHub today. Actually is a really nice sidebar here. So actually when you're browsing your repository, you can see the whole list of files, much like you'd have in an IDE, you know, a development environment. Maybe something like VS Code or what have you. I forget what the thing in Vim is, Nerd Tree, was it? You have a nice little bar down here. So what we're going to do is actually go through these steps and what you need to do to actually get this set up, and then actually configure it. So what I'm going to do is actually switch across here to Emacs and go through the steps. So what I'll do is actually rattle through most of the steps that I've covered in the previous video and just show you the differences that you need to do to actually get treesitter support. So I'm going to cover how you build this from scratch, but also if you followed on from the previous video, how you actually can recompile Emacs with the treesitter support. So first step is we need to actually clone the Git repository of Emacs. So git clone and then the path to the Emacs repository. Now this is going to take 6 or 7 minutes to download, so just be patient. And this is actually, funnily enough, the longest step on my machine. Downloading the Git repository took longer than actually building Emacs. So we download Emacs, we change into the directory here, cd Emacs, and then what we need to do is actually install some packages. Now I'm on Fedora, so the package names are going to be different on different Linux distributions like Arch, Debian. So you'll need to cross-reference the package names. But on Debian, on Fedora, what we do is run sudo dnf group install development tools. And what this does is it installs a lot of tools we need to build and compile Emacs, basically. But it doesn't install everything. So that's the first step. That will install things, I think, like make, maybe GCC. And GCC is actually required for the native compilation in Emacs. So that's the first step. After we've done that, we run sudo dnf build dependencies Emacs. And what that does is that will actually install all the dependencies needed to build Emacs. Well, most of them anyway. There's a few that we need to actually add. So again, these steps will be slightly different on Ubuntu and Arch, but the basic principle is the same. On Debian and Ubuntu, you have a similar thing, I think it's called build dependencies or something. So the same kind of steps you go through. What we then do is actually install all the image packages we need. So things like JPEG, GIF, TIFF, SVG, WebP, ImageMagick, that sort of thing. So we install all the image packages. And then what we need to do is actually install some packages for Emacs. So we need to install things like autoconf, gnutil devel, gtk devel, and that's for actually building Emacs as a pure GTK application. Janssen devel is needed for JSON. libgcc JIT and libgcc JIT devel needed to, I think they're needed for the native compilation as well. It's basically, it will compile Lisp files as native code so it can run faster. We have MPC support here, ncurses, and text info, I believe, is for building the documentation. So that's the packages we need. Then the actual the packages for treesitter. So for treesitter, what we need to do, if treesitter isn't in your repository, you can actually download it and compile it manually. But luckily, treesitter is available on Fedora. So what we need to do is run sudo dnf install libtreesitter devel. I installed treesitter CLI, but that's not needed. But what is needed is gcc-c++. You would think that that would be installed with the development tools, but it isn't. So you need to install gcc-c++, and this is required to actually build the treesitter packages from the Git repositories. So that's what you need to get set up first of all, and then we go through and actually build this. So first of all, what we need to do is we need to export the path to GCC, and you can find that by running which GCC, and you'll see that's at user bin GCC. So what we do before actually configuring Emacs, we actually export GCC. We export cc equals user bin GCC and export cxx equals user bin GCC. Once we've done that, we can move on to the next step, which is running autogen. So we just run /autogen.sh. And after we've done that, we can actually run configure. So one thing I just want to mention is, if you've been following along in the previous video, basically what you need to do is just install the treesitter packages. And then before we get to the auto gen, what you want to do is make dist clean. So you would come into the Emacs thing here and run make dist clean, and that will clean up the previous build basically. So that's if you were following on from the previous video. Run make dist clean, then export the path to GCC and run auto gen. Right, so the next step is the actual configure. So you can run /configure help, but this is the config that we're actually going to be using, and all we've done is actually appended -- with -tree sitter to the previous video's options. So I'll go through this. We got with dbus, GIF, JPEG, PNG, RSVG, that's for SVG support, TIFF, got ImageMagick, JSON, XWidget, modules, that's needed if you want to use something like vterm. Now these are the important ones. With native compilation, that's for the native compilation of the code. Pure GTK, that's to build Emacs as a pure GTK application running natively on Wayland, not using X-Wayland. With treesitter, without pop, and what that does is that disables setting up Emacs, with a mail server. If you actually install Emacs 28.2 on Ubuntu, what will happen is it'll actually download postfix as well, and I don't use Emacs for mail. So if you want to use Emacs with GNUS, remove the without pop section, and the prefix where all this is going to be installed, which is actually the default, is user local. So what will happen is when you build stuff, Emacs is going to be installed in user local bin, and all the libraries will be installed in like user local lib, something like that. So that's actually configuring it. So the configuring it takes like a minute or two, and then we move on to the next step, which is actually making this. So after you run configure, what you do is you run make -j $, and in parentheses nproc. So what's nproc when it's at home? So if I run this, I'll show you what it does. So if I do echo nproc, it's going to return the number of cores. So what we're basically saying is just use all the cores to build Emacs. And I was expecting this to take hours or have to leave it overnight. It's actually done in less than 5 minutes on my machine. I've got a Dell XPS 15, which is I think a 2019 model with 16 gig of RAM and an NVIDIA graphics card. And it took about 5 or 6 minutes to actually completely build Emacs. On a 2011 MacBook Air with 4 gig of RAM, it took a bit longer. I think it took maybe 15 or 20 minutes. So that's actually making Emacs, and what that's going to do is that's actually going to create a Emacs binary that you can run in the repo in source Emacs. So what you can do is first of all run source /Emacs-Q, and what that will do is that will launch Emacs without loading your config. What you can then do is actually evaluate this bit of code here, native comp available P, and what that should do is return T for true. So that way you know that native comp's working. And then all you need to do is actually install this. So sudo make install. So that's that. And now what we have is the actual setup of treesitter in our init.el. So this is a bit of code here. I'll actually show you in my Emacs config actually. So config Emacs init.el. So first of all, what we have is, pull it down one. So first thing to do is actually require treesit. So the command is actually called treesit in Emacs. On the web, you'll find it's called tree-sitter. So that's the first thing. When you're acquiring it, it's called treesit, and the actual commands that show up in the mini buffer are either called treesit or ts mode. So what we're going to do is actually come down to the treesitter section. Okay, so this is the actual treesitter section. So what we've got here is 2 blocks of code. The first one is to actually add languages. So what you have is what are called language grammars. So Python, C, Bash, Make. And what I'll do is I'll show you all the different languages that you can actually install and how you do that. So what you can do is you can set up this variable called treesit-language-source-alist. And in here, what you do is specify the name of the language and then the path to the Git repository for that language. Now, the next block of code, what we can do is something called major-mode-remap-alist. And what we can actually do is remap the default modes used by Emacs to use the treesitter version instead. So as I said, I've got lots of shell scripts. I don't write stuff as bash scripts. I write them as POSIX shell scripts. And unfortunately, there isn't a treesitter mode for shell scripts, but there is one for bash. So what I've done is actually set sh mode to use bash ts mode. So I want to come across to my bin directory and just come across to detect. So it just changes to sh mode. So by default, shell scripts with a shebang of bin sh are going to be registered as shell script sh. So that's the mode that they're going to be registered to by default. But as you can see here, what we've got is sh mode bash ts mode. So whenever I open a shell script, what you can see here is it's now actually saying bash, and it's using the treesitter syntax highlighting for bash for my shell scripts, which is fine because they're pretty much similar. So that's my sort of workaround, and that's how we get shell scripts to automatically use the treesitter language. So the next thing is, what are all the languages that are available and how do we install them? So if I come across here, what we'll see is on the treesitter page, we've got the language bindings and then the parsers. And what you see is there's a load of different parsers here, and not all of these are made by treesitter, as it were. A lot of these are community generated. So as you scroll down here, this list, you'll see some, like you can see here, C is under treesitter. Let's see if Bash is, yeah, Bash. You can see the URL here, treesitter bash. Okay, so those are the differences. You've got community generated language parsers, and you've got ones that are done by treesitter. The reason why that's important is because some of them don't work, basically. So what I'll actually do is come across and show you, for instance, if you're using Emacs, 2 of the parsers that you'd probably be interested in would be Emacs list mode and org mode, and unfortunately neither of them work. So what I'll do is actually come across here and show you. So the way you actually set this up is by copying the URL here, and what we're going to do is switch across, and we run Emacs treesitter install language grammar. And what we need to do now is actually put in the language name. So you can see this is eLisp. So if we put in eLisp down here, spell it properly, eLisp. What's going to happen is there's no recipe for eLisp. Do you want to build it interactively? And that's because it's not part of the treesitter repository. It's a separate community generated repository. So what we have to do is we press Y, okay, and it says enter the URL of the Git repository for the language grammar. We yank that in. We can either use it with or without the .git extension, but I'll put the Git extension on there. Okay, into the tag or branch default, into the subdirectory. Okay, just press enter for all these, and when you do this the first time, it's actually going to prompt you to create a tree-sitter directory in your Emacs config, which if you've got it set up properly using XDG specification, should be in .config Emacs. We just press return there, and what it's going to do is it's clone the repository, and you can see here library installed to config Emacs treesitter libtreesitter -elisp.so. So if I come across to that directory .config Emacs treesitter and show the hidden files, what you'll see here is we've got two files. We've got the one I showed you before, the bash.so, and we've got the libtreesitter elisp.so. So what should happen after you actually install the language grammar is you should be able to activate it. It should show up as a list of language grammars that you can actually use and apply to a document. So if I press MX and press TS mode, what you'll see here is the sort of some of the built-in modes here. So we've got Bash, CSS, C++. What I think happens is it's actually listing these, but when you select them, you still got to actually put in the URL. So even though it's listing these, I don't think they're available. If I scroll through here, you'll see that there's no eLisp listed. So even though we've installed that treesitter language grammar for eLisp, it's not actually showing up. So that's one thing I sort of wanted to mention. Also, org doesn't seem to compile. So what we'll do is we'll just delete that eLisp one. And we save. What we'll do is we'll save a HTML page and see if we can get the syntax highlighting. So these are some of the pages that I actually came across researching treesitter. So this is the list of all the languages. This was the treesitter eLisp. This is some notes on treesitter and how you can build it manually, and this is how you use the add to list thing I showed you there. Treesitter again here. Now, where was the treesitter repositories? Okay, so this is the built-in language grammars available on treesitter. So you can see we've got like treesitter HTML. So what I actually want to do is actually save this page. Let's see if I can save this page. We actually get the syntax highlighting. Okay, let's open up the desktop. Let's see if that opens up. Okay, so it looks crap, but that's fine. What we just want to do is actually see if we get the pieces. So this is HTML. So what happens if we go TS mode? It should be HTML TS mode. So it's the format is the language grammar - TS mode. So if we do HTML TS mode, you get this error: treesit mode but HTML isn't available. So even though the mode is actually listed, it's not actually set up. So what we need to do is actually set this up in here. And for some reason my fans are going crazy. Let me just see what that is. Is that Emacs? No, it's OBS. Okay. So what we'll do here is we'll actually add the HTML language grammar. So right, so what we need to do is come across here, and you can see here we got the HTML language grammar. So treesit HTML. So there's two ways we can do this. We can add it to the list, or we can do it through, running Emacs, as I showed you. So what we'll do here is, let me just paste that in and then copy this. Okay. Bear with me a second while I stick this in. So HTML. Okay. So you can put in the list of languages like this, where you have the language and then the path to the Git repository. So now if I run treesit install language grammar, if I type HTML, what I'm just wondering is, does it pick this up automatically? Okay, default to install to treesit, going repository. Okay, that's now done. So that's the method where you have this treesit-language-source-alist, and you actually put in the stuff you want, or you can actually do it interactively and put in the URL. But what happens when you do that is that path isn't appended automatically to this section here. So you could use that method and go through, but then you're not going to have a list of all the things you've installed. So let's come across here and see if this now works. So we'll run HTML TS mode. And didn't really notice too much difference in that syntax highlighting. So HTML mode. I managed to pick a file where you can't actually tell the bloody difference. But it's actually showing it's actually working now instead of throwing the error. So let's see if we can find something. We can find something that's a bit better. What about this one? Okay. See if that's any different. Okay, so let's turn on HTML TS mode. You can't really tell any difference in that, sod's law. Okay, so let's scratch that. That's basically the method. So let's do the same thing, but without the adding it here. So what I'm going to do is come across big Emacs treesit. I'll delete that and remove this. So the format you need here is add to list treesit-language. You've got to have the little comma, and then there's the extra doodad at the end here to match up to this one. Yeah, makes sense. So if you want to add more, it'd be like CSS. So that would be the actual format. But what I'm going to do is just show you how we can do this interactively as well. So the difference is when you've got the name of the language grammar and the Git repository path in there, it's not going to prompt you to actually enter it, but if you don't, it will. Make sense? So I'll just evaluate that. And I'll just use a different one. I'll use CSS just to show you. So Emacs, treesit install language grammar, CSS, so the name, no recipe, do you want to build it interactively, Y, enter the Git repository. I think you may have just still picked that up. So treesit grammar, CSS, and you can just press return for all of these. Okay, and now you see it's actually generated that, and we got the CSS. So is there any CSS we could actually have a look at? Let's just reload this and see what. Okay. And where bloody hell? Let's try it. Just grab one of these. Grab this. Copy it into a file. Test.css. Okay, so this is the not much CSS, but let's see if there's any difference. CSS TS mode. Well, there was a slight change in the color in some of these, but it's going to be difficult to sort of find something to actually show it as clearly as the bash syntax highlighting, but you get the general idea. And so that's the two parts, either adding the language in here or doing it manually. And the second part is actually remapping the mode. So you can see here we're in sort of CSS mode. This is the major mode we're in. So if we want to remap that to use the TS mode, what we do is this. So CSS mode would become CSS-TS mode. Remap that there. Okay. And so this is now using the TS mode version. And let me just put the CSS mode. You won't notice much difference, but when it switches, you can see that these were the color of the revert and none changed. So that's a big plus, obviously. That makes it all worthwhile. So CSS mode, and then here's CSS TS mode. You can see that's now got different sort of highlighting, but that's how we can set it so that it always uses the TS mode. So those are the two parts: adding the language, the treesit-language-source-alist with the language, and then the Git repository, and then actually remapping the modes down here. So basically all you do is, open the document and see what the mode is, and basically all you need to do is change the mode from like CSS-mode to CSS-TS mode. That's going to be the same for basically every language. And as you can see, you can also remap other modes to use the TS mode. So here, we're remapping SH mode to bash TS mode. Okay. So those are the sort of the repositories. This is the list of all the sort of language grammars that you've got. You've got the language bindings and you've got the parsers. Not sure what the difference is. I haven't looked into it too much, but just having a look through this, the ones that you might be interested in, obviously Bash, all your CSS. Haven't tried Common Lisp. We just tried CSS there, HTML. You got Docker files. As I showed you, Emacs Lisp doesn't seem to work. If I come across here again and we come to the issues, how to install, and this was, what was it? Was this last year or this year? I think this is March 31st this year. Basically, a guy saying, I've set all this up, but says no language registered for major mode Emacs Lisp mode. So I'm not sure what the issue is, but I just couldn't get it to work. And also the org language mode doesn't compile at all. Doesn't make. There's actually an issue on the GitHub for that one, which I'll find down here. So we've got things for Fish, Go, Haskell. Might be useful if you use like Xmonad. We've got JavaScript. I think JavaScript's a built-in one. So my brief experience and looking at this, the ones that are actually officially supported on the treesitter repositories are more likely to work than the ones that that are sort of community based, which some of them haven't actually been updated for several years. So we've got LaTeX, we've got Makefiles, Markdown. I come across to org. So we come across when we go issues here. You can see this was like last year, 2 years ago. Build fails. So yeah, this is basically guy saying, fails. I'll show you that, see if I can actually get working. So what I'll do is build this interactively. I'll just go treesit-language-grammar-install org. We'll try it. You can use it with or without the .git. We'll just use it without .git. I think maybe it's building this time. So let's actually have a look at that. So this is org mode. So let's see if org ts mode comes up. Org ts. No, see, it's not actually showing up. Org ts mode should be. If we list ts-mode, I don't think it's actually going to show up in here. Okay. Let me just go into the treesitter. The funny thing is, you can actually see it's actually been built, but it's not showing up. I'm not sure if there's something I'm missing that you need to reload the languages or something. So if we just run treesit, see what options we get here. I don't think there's anything I've missed down here. Let's try that again. Org. To see. So what happened before was I was actually getting errors where it wasn't compiling, but now it's actually compiling. So we've got org here, and it should. I would have thought it should automatically show up. I don't think there's anything else we need to do. So if you actually get it working, do let me know if I've missed a step here. But as you can see, when I did the HTML and the CSS modes, that it automatically showed up. It was automatically enabled and you could use it. But with the Emacs and the org mode, they're not actually showing up as languages. I'm not sure. Org mode. So restart org mode. Let's see. Org ts. No. TS mode. You can see these are the ones we just enabled, but it's not actually listed there. So that's kind of annoying that the two sort of modes you'd most want in Emacs don't appear to work in my sort of brief testing. Okay, so this was another bit of documentation, and this again was the where I found the add to list major mode remap, so you can actually remap the modes. This is the Emacs tree sitter site, and this is, if I come back up to the thing, I think it should say some of the sort of, you know, outline of how this works, but this is the Emacs sort of Git repository sort of lowdown on how you get this set up, and you can basically, let me increase the size of this. So for Tree Sitter, you can actually either install it with your package manager or by sort of cloning it from source. So these are some of the sort of steps we went through. And this is actually installing the language definitions or the grammars, which is the Git repositories. So this is sort of the general outline of how you do this. Okay, like require tree sit. This is how you can sort of query stuff. Again, here's the another document that I've actually put a link to. This is, you know, the sort of the format and all the different repositories that you can use for these different languages. I think this guy's actually got a thing where you can update all the languages by running commands, so it might be useful to look at. Again, this is the list of all the repositories on Tree Sitter for all the language grammars. So you can see here we've got Graph, CCP, HTML, Python, Haskell, Bash. So these are all the ones that are done by Tree Sitter. But as I said, it's confusing because, you know, you come in here, and if I've got anything with Python, yeah, let me just use something with Python, for example. Okay, so I've got a Python script here, and you'd think, you know, you can go Python TS mode, but when you do that, you get this error. Okay, it's just throwing errors all over the shop. So that's the issue, is that even though these modes are listed, you've actually got to install them before you can use them. So for Python, let's set up Python. So the nice thing about the ones that are on Tree Sitter is you just have to change the last bit here. The format is going to be the same. It's going to be Tree Sitter dash and then the language name. So where's Python? Here we go. Tree Sitter Python. So after you've done that, you need to evaluate it. So put the cursor at the end, Control X, Control E, is it? Yeah. And then we can install, we can run treesit to install language grammar. And what you'll see down here is actually listing the ones we've set up. It's listing HTML because I did that before. But we can come down and select Python. Once we do that, it's just going to say install to Tree Sitter. If you don't add the Git repository and the language name up here, what happens is it says there's no recipe. You want to build it interactively. You've got to paste in the URL for the repository and click return a few times. Okay, so that's now cloned the repository. So if I run Python TS mode, should work. There we go. So we've got Python, and we want to set it to use Python TS mode all the time. So Did I get rid of the CSS thing? Yeah, I think I did. So I'll just change this. Get rid of that CSS thing later. Okay, so turn it to Python mode. So this is Python mode. If I can actually find anything where the syntax highlighting is going to be more noticeable. So Python mode, and then we've got Python TS mode. Don't know if you can recognize the difference in that. But what we can do now is set this to be the default. So add to list major-mode-remap-alist, Python mode, Python TS mode. So now whenever I open one of these, it should be using TS mode, and we can run treesit. I think it's parse language grammar or explore mode. Python. God's sake, yeah. Now it's throwing an error. There's no such file or directory, so maybe that wasn't working because you can normally do something where it can build a tree. I forget what the thing was. I thought it was explore mode. Explore tree mode. Nope, that didn't work either. Okay, so let me just delete some of this stuff and stick it back to how it was. And delete those files. So there seems to be some issues with it. Let me see if I can get the explore mode thing working with Bash. I don't think it will do. Treesit explore mode treesitter. I'm sure I had this working before. Let me just close it and reopen. I forget what the bloody thing was called. There's something where you could actually kind of show a tree. But for the life of me, I can't remember what it was called. So you've got two order completions. You've got treesit. So if you type Emacs treesit, you're going to get this list of stuff, which I couldn't get someone to actually working to demo it. The explore mode is kind of supposed to sort of build an outline of the document syntax. So the most important one is the treesit install language grammar. Then we've got all this other stuff you can have a look through. Then the other one we've actually got is the TS mode. So if you run TS-mode, you will see a list of all these. But again, these are the supported language grammars, but they're not installed, which kind of is a bit annoying and a bit unintuitive. Because you go to use it, and it throws all those big errors up. It's a bit baffling as to why it's doing that. So that's the sort of issue, is that you've actually got to enable these before you can use them. So let's see if I can find another language. YAML. So like we've got YAML here. So I've got Alacrity, which is a YAML file, and if we run the TS mode, you can see YAML TS mode. So this is what's confusing. You cannot activate treesitter because language grammar for Python is not found. Okay, let me just restart Emacs. Actually, let's kill Emacs. Big Alacrity. You'll get the same issue. YAML mode. Okay. So whenever you try and run a mode that you've not actually installed the Git repository for, you're going to get this error. So that's a bit sort of confusing. So again, we want the YAML mode. It's just going to be treated a YAML. YAML. Okay, now it's giving an error. Okay, did we need to put the .git in? So this is why it's really confusing. YAML TS mode. So no, that's not working. Let's check the Emacs repository, see if it's actually downloaded that. So you can see it's not actually downloaded that YAML file. So that's why I would recommend actually sticking it in your Emacs config. So what you want to do is, as I showed you before, YAML I actually had this working before, so I know it works. So language grammar install YAML. Okay, now it's not loading. This is funny because I swear I had this actually working before, so I'm not sure why that is. Let's unless the mode was somewhere else. That may be the issue. I've put in the wrong URL. Yeah, of course it is. I was thinking that it was actually a one on treesit, it's not. So my bad. But easily done. So let's come across and change that URL and redo it. So that would be why it wasn't working. Reevaluate it. Try it again. YAML. Okay, so is it still? It's still using the old path. So that's weird. So what's kind of happening is it's remembering what was in here and it's remembering the wrong one. So let's see if we can just, if opening it again works, or if I have to, yep, so it's still doing that even though I've reevaluated that. Let's restart Emacs. It's better to actually show you the problems that you might actually come across rather than doing a demo where everything works perfectly. So let's try this again. YAML coding repository compiling. Okay, now it's done. So the issue is if you've added stuff and you put in the wrong URL or what have you, you're going to need to restart Emacs for it to actually pick up the correct changes in that file. So let's come across to Emacs init.el. So the YAML is by iCatYang. And for some reason, I was thinking that it was actually built in. Config alacrity. Okay, so the only difference you're actually going to notice when I turn on this mode is that this Y will turn purple. So you can see we've got the mode down here, and if we now run YAML TS mode, it should work. You can see it's now turned purple. So all that effort wasn't in vain. We have a result. We have turned one character purple. So that obviously makes it all worthwhile. So if we want to, remap that, we would do YAML mode to bash TS, not bash TS, to YAML TS mode, and evaluate that. And then whenever we open a YAML file, it will actually fix that. So YAML And again, remove the end thingy there, so you can see that all matches up. You need the comma here on each one of these, otherwise it's actually going to throw an error. And so now when I open this file, that Y should automatically be colored. And as you can see, it is now. So that's using the YAML thing. So let's see if I can get that explore. Is it explore tree? I don't know what it is. I swear I had it working before. It'd come up with like a little another buffer showing an outline of the code, but yeah, it's not doing it now. So there are sort of lots of languages here, but unfortunately, not all of them are actually going to work. So again, you know, there's useful ones, Bash. I think there's two things. There's one, what languages are you going to be writing stuff in, and two, what languages are your config files going to be in, for example. So, you know, I've got Alacrity as a YAML file, but the majority of my config files are just going to be plain config files, you know, like MPD. So this is the conf. Is there a TS mode for conf? No, you can see here TS mode. So conf mode. We've got a conf TS mode. No. So the large majority of your config files are just going to be conf. Yeah, it's going to be conf files, as it were, either with or without the .conf extension. So the only ones really that I've got that aren't would be Alacrity and Emacs. I don't think there's anything else. We've got transmission. That's a JSON file. I won't open that in case it's got settings in it. That's just an empty file. See, that's another comp file. WeChat, wget, tmux. So yeah, the only files really would be Emacs and Alacrity. And if I open up Emacs and come into my init, unfortunately that's Lisp TS mode is not showing up. So this is eLisp. If I run eLisp, we're not getting a TS mode there. And if we run Lisp, probably Lisp, but Lisp mode, there's no Emacs Lisp mode actually showing up. I've uninstalled that now, but there wasn't anything showing up. Okay, so I think that's pretty much most of the sort of the gist of everything. So again, this was basically the steps of actually building this that I covered in this previous video here. So if you'd follow along in the previous video, all you need to do is, before you get to AutoGen, all you need to do is basically do a make dist clean, maybe do a git pull, export, run AutoGen, configure it and make it, and that's basically it. And then set up tree sitter. Otherwise you've got to go through the whole process to actually build it from scratch if you didn't follow along in the previous video. And again, you'll need to check the package names if you're on a different distribution, so have a look at that. And this is the nice new sidebar we get in GitHub here, which is really really useful. So you can actually come across into anything. It makes it much easier to actually browse on GitHub. We can come back to that thing without having to keep going up here and faffing about. that's just another little thing. So this is the main treesitter site, the list of all the grammars. Some are um, done by treesitter, some are community ones, and again, a lot of the community ones I tried didn't actually work. The Emacs Lisp one and the org mode, which is really annoying. And that was the YAML one we did. This is a document about treesitter, one of the few about. This was the sort of manual setup of building Emacs with treesitter, manually cloning treesitter and building it. This was that other document, which gave me a gist of how you can install the languages. They're using use package here, whereas I'm just using straight Emacs Lisp. I think there was a thing here where we were saying he built something where you can actually update them all. This was the list of all the built-in repositories. The treesitter. That was the treesitter Python one we were looking at. And that was that sort of document with the HTML. So is it actually worth it? It really just depends on the languages that you're going to use. So for a lot of them, the syntax highlighting wasn't noticeably different in, for example, the CSS or the HTML file. So there wasn't too much kind of to be gained from that. But the bash ones, I think, make it worth it. So this is the bash syntax highlighting, which is much nicer than the regular one. Can I open two? So sh mode, I think it's going to change it in both of them. Yeah, of course it is. So that's how it normally looks with the, you can see down here, shell script mode. So that's how it normally looks, and you can see, for example, this is a good example here. This is a variable with another variable reference and then a subshell. And if I turn on bash ts mode, see how now this is all highlighted so that we can actually see the subshell, and the same down here. So I think it is worth it for some languages. Some other ones, HTML, CSS, didn't seem to, in my quick test, show that much of a difference. You can see down here, if I just toggle it on and off, that's the standard. So I think that does make it actually easier to read a lot of this stuff. It will highlight variables and things much better than the standard mode. But as I said, there are a lot of things that language grammars that just didn't sort of seem to work for me, like the org and the eLisp. So it really does depend. You can see some of these haven't been updated for several years, but they still work. Doesn't mean they're not useful. It's just they're community based, and it's just one person updating that language grammar. So you may get sort of issues, as opposed to something that's actually built into treesitter language that's on the treesitter repository. So that's kind of one of the issues, is depending on what language you sort of select, it's going to be hit or miss if it's a community-based repository, and whether it actually works or if there's any issues, or if it's actually going to be updated. So that's one issue. But you could, of course, fork the repository, because all you need to do to actually install a language grammar is put in the name of the language and then the path to the Git repository. So you could fix something if you had the knowledge and just manually install it like that. So that was the difference. Just to recap, is if you have the things in here, when you do treesitter install language grammar, when you type in YAML, it's going to automatically pull that down. If you don't have that there, it will prompt you for the URL, and then you've got to click through a few times, it will download it, but it doesn't automatically add that language grammar and the Git repository you've used to this treesit-language-source-alist. So if you manually install and put in the URLs, they're not going to show up in here, and you're not going to have a record. So that's why I recommend using this method here. Just make sure you put in the right URLs. And this is how you actually remap stuff. So this is how we remapped YAML mode to use YAML TS mode. And again, the format is basically the language name and then TS mode. So whatever language you're using here, you can see this is Bash, but normally it would be SH. So you can see the name of the mode being used. If I just type it, so sh mode, so you can see this is shell script sh. So all you need to do is come through and go sh, and you can see it. Okay, it's sh mode. So you then know what the name of the current mode is, and then you can just basically change it to -ts mode, and that will get it to automatically use the treesit mode instead. And again, I haven't got the buffer thing showing the outline of the document working. I can't remember what that was, and it's just not sort of doing it now. Could have sworn it was something like treesit explore mode. Was it explore mode? I need to switch this back to Bash. Hang on, let me switch this back to Bash TS mode. Treesit explore mode, Bash. Yeah, that's it. Okay, got there eventually. So when you sort of click on things, it will actually come up here. So if I can see variable name, string, command, sort of, you can see all this stuff here. That kind of brings up a outline, so you can see variable name, string, command. So you can see. Let me see if I can find a case statement or something. So you can see clicking on while will generate this explorer. That's what it's called. So it's kind of showing the actual code, which is sort of pretty cool. So the way we did that was we run Emacs treesit explore mode. Then it's going to prompt you. It's sort of enabled now, but it's actually going to prompt you for the mode. So let's see if we get that working with the YAML file. Alacrity. So this is YAML. It's using the treesit YAML mode. We can tell that because the Y is purple. So if I now run treesit explore mode YAML, will this work? Okay, it does. So you can see here, I'm actually clicking through stuff. It should switch through down here. I haven't really played around with this too much because, as you can see, I couldn't even remember how to actually get the thing to come up. But that's how we do it. We make sure we're actually in the mode, and then we run treesit explore mode, and it comes up with the thing. So that's getting treesit set up. Not completely obvious, and yeah, actually getting it installed and built is not too much of an issue. It's when you actually go to use it. You think that, you know, I said TS mode, all these things would actually be enabled out of the box because they're listed, but they're not. When you go to use them, it's actually going to throw a big error, which can be quite confusing. So you need to install the language grammars first before you could actually use the mode. And this is how you can basically remap stuff. So I'll put links to this under the video if I can find the link. So I'll put links to this video and this document here on all the steps you need to go through. But depending on your machine, you can actually get this set up in under half an hour. Cloning the Emacs repository is actually, funnily enough, the thing that takes the longest amount of time. Just go through, install all the packages, autogen, export, configure, make, and then set up treesit like this with require treesit, add to list, the treesit-language-source-alist, and then the major-mode-remap-alist to actually remap the built-in Emacs major modes to use treesit instead. So I think it is worth it, but it really depends on the language that you use, whether the syntax highlighting is different enough. But I think the explore mode's pretty cool if you can get your head around it. But unfortunately, there really isn't a lot of documentation about this. Like you don't run Emacs treesit. The third link is how to use Emacs 29 treesit on Reddit. And this was the error that sort of comes up. When you activate any mode. And this is basically giving a link to that document I was showing you here on how you sort of set this up manually, but there isn't a lot of guides or blogs. I think I also linked to this one here. So you may find a couple of things lurking about, but you can see there's not much even in this. On the process you've actually got to go through to get the language grammars working. So hopefully this will sort of point you in the right direction, but just be aware there are a lot of these community ones that may not work. So you're going to have to sort of go through and check if there are any sort of issues with them. And if there are, then the only option you've really got is to raise an issue on GitHub on the repository for the language grammar. So those are all the language grammars that are sort of built in. I was a bit annoyed there was no shell mode, just bash. So yeah, it's pretty useful, but it's just going to take a little while to actually play around. Actually figure stuff out, because I said there's not much documentation that I could actually find if you come through syntax highlighting. There's this sort of documentation, but sometimes you want an actual guide, someone writing a blog post or something like that. So I'll put links to all this and wrap it up now.